"Don't show up to my son's graduation," my daughter-in-law said to my face at the dinner table. "You'll embarrass everyone." I looked at my son across the table. He said nothing. I drove home, walked to my study, and picked up the phone. 6 weeks later, I watched from the back of that auditorium as federal agents arrested her father during the reception. Before I get into all of it, let me tell you something about myself. I spent 31 years as a forensic accountant for the federal government. Not the glamorous kind you see on television, the quiet kind. The kind who sits in a windowless office for 3 weeks, staring at spreadsheets until a pattern emerges that nobody else noticed. I retired at 63 with a pension, a bad knee from too many years at a desk, and the particular gift of seeing lies in numbers. My wife Susan used to joke that I could smell fraud the way some people smell rain coming. She died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After she passed, my son became my whole world. His name is Adam. He's 34 now, works in commercial real estate, has his mother's eyes and her stubbornness. For the first 2 years after Susan died, it was just the two of us. Dinner every Sunday at my house. He'd bring a six-pack and we watch football and talk about nothing in particular, which felt like everything. Then he met Vanessa. I want to be fair about Vanessa. She is a beautiful woman, intelligent, driven, sharp, in a way that can cut you before you realize you're bleeding. When Adam first brought her to Sunday dinner, she brought flowers, asked good questions, and laughed at the right moments. I liked her. I told Adam so on the drive to his car that night. He was so relieved he hugged me in the driveway, something he hadn't done since his mother's funeral. Her parents were the problem. Or rather, the problem revealed itself to be her parents. Douglas and Irene Holt. They owned Holt Property Group, a real estate development firm out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Old money feel, new money behavior. Douglas had the kind of handshake that lasted 2 seconds too long, and the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. Irene wore jewelry on a Tuesday afternoon, like most people wear a watch. When we first met at a dinner Adam had arranged, Douglas spent the first 20 minutes asking about my career, which I thought was genuine interest, until I realized he was cataloging my net worth, or lack thereof. My pension is comfortable, not impressive. The house is paid off. I have savings, modest investments, nothing spectacular. Douglas Holt had made clear, in the polished way wealthy men do, that I was a different category of person than he was. He didn't say it directly. He didn't need to. It was in the way he paused before answering my questions, the way Irene redirected conversation toward their lake house in South Carolina, their son's law firm in Raleigh, their plans for Adam and Vanessa's future. Adam got accepted into an executive MBA program at Duke. Part-time, evenings and weekends, 2 years. It was a big deal. He'd worked for it, paid the deposit himself, told me about it over the phone with the kind of quiet pride he'd learned from his mother. I was proud enough that I cried a little after I hung up. Didn't tell him that. The Holts paid for the rest of the tuition. All of it. $84,000. I found out the way you find out things you weren't supposed to know, through a comment made carelessly at a family dinner 6 months in. Douglas mentioned it as though he was talking about replacing a water heater. Just something they'd handled. I watched Adam's face. He didn't look at me. I said nothing that night, but something shifted. The Sunday dinners continued, but Adam started cancelling, not often at first, once a month, then twice. Vanessa had plans. The Holts were visiting. There was a work event, a charity gala the Holts had invited them to, a weekend in Charleston. I told myself this was normal. I told myself Susan would say I was being too sensitive. Then came the graduation dinner. Adam finished his MBA in May. The formal ceremony was at Duke's main campus a Sunday afternoon. There was a dinner the night before at a restaurant the Holts had reserved. Private room, 40 people, all of them from the Holt side except me and my sister Pauline, who'd driven up from Georgia just to be there. I sat across from Douglas and Irene. Pauline made conversation. I ate and listened. At some point during dessert, when Adam had stepped away from the table, Vanessa leaned toward me and said it quietly enough that only I could hear. "We think it would be better if you didn't come tomorrow, to the ceremony." She kept her voice pleasant, the way you'd suggest a different parking spot. "Douglas is going to speak. There are going to be photographs. It'll be a lot of people Adam knows professionally now. We just think it would be cleaner." I set my fork down. "Cleaner," I said. "It's nothing personal." She picked up her wineglass. "You understand." I looked down the table at my son's empty chair. I said, "Of course," and I meant it the way people mean it when they don't mean it at all. I drove Pauline back to her hotel. She was furious on my behalf, the way sisters are, loud and certain. I was quiet. I hubbed her good night in the hotel parking lot and drove home. It was 11:15 on a Friday night. I went to my study, sat at my desk in the dark for a while, and then I turned on the lamp and opened my laptop. I had contacts from 31 years in federal accounting. Not all of them were still in government. Some had moved into private consulting, private investigation, financial compliance work. One of them was a man named Pete Calloway, who I'd worked alongside during a tax fraud investigation in 2009 that had taken 14 months and ended with 3 convictions. Pete was thorough and precise and had the ethical compass of a much older man when I first met him at 30. He ran his own firm now. I sent him an email at 11:40 that night. Subject line, research request, personal matter. I told him I needed a comprehensive background on Holt Property Group, Douglas and Irene Holt, Charlotte, NC, corporate filings, tax compliance, litigation history, financial discrepancies, whatever the records showed. He called me the next morning at 7:30. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "I'm sure," I said. "Give me 2 weeks." I didn't go to the graduation ceremony. I told Adam I wasn't feeling well. He texted back, "Feel better, Dad." I sat in my living room and watched a documentary about the Smoky Mountains and ate leftover soup from the refrigerator. The Holts took photographs with my son at Duke. Irene cried. Douglas gave a speech. I know because Adam sent me 3 pictures that evening with a text that said, "Wish you'd been there." I didn't respond right away. I sat with that for a long time. Pete came back to me in 11 days, not 14. We met at a diner outside of Charlotte, halfway between his office and my house. He arrived before me, a habit he'd had since I'd known him, and had already ordered coffee. He had a legal-sized manila folder on the table and a look I recognized from our years together, the look that meant he'd found something significant and was deciding how to hand it to me. Douglas Holt has been running a double ledger on Holt Property Group for at least 5 years, Pete said before I'd sat down fully. Possibly longer, but 5 years is what I can document cleanly. He walked me through it methodically. My brain shifted into the old mode automatically, the way your body remembers how to swim. Holt Property Group's reported income was about 2/3 of their actual revenue. The remainder, Pete estimated between $300,000 and $400,000 annually, was being funneled through a separate LLC called Carolina's Premier Leasing, a property management company that existed on paper but had no employees, no office, no actual clients. The revenue it reported was fabricated. The expenses it deducted were either inflated or fictional. It was, in technical terms, a reasonably sophisticated tax evasion scheme. In human terms, it meant Douglas Holt had been stealing from the federal government while writing checks to cover his future son-in-law's graduate education, buying a lake house, and informing me, through his daughter-in-law, that I was too embarrassing to attend my son's graduation. "How solid is this?" I asked. Solid enough that I almost filed the tip myself. Pete slid the folder across the table. "I wanted to ask you first. What kind of exposure are we talking? If the IRS gets this, and they will, because this is textbook what they look for, back taxes, penalties and interest, we're talking north of $2 million owed. Federal charges for willful evasion are possible. State charges depending on how North Carolina wants to play it." He paused. "This isn't a slap on the wrist situation." I looked at the folder. 30 years ago, I would have been excited about a find like this. The pure professional satisfaction of a pattern surfacing from noise. Now I just felt tired. His daughter is married to my son, I said. Pete nodded. He didn't offer anything. He knew me well enough to know I didn't need advice right now. I needed time. Give me a few days, I said. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. That evening I called Pauline and talked for an hour without telling her what I'd found. Just talked. She told me about her garden, her grandchildren, a television show she was watching. Normal things. When we hung up, I sat in Susan's reading chair, still hers, always hers, and looked at the folder on the coffee table. My son had not called to ask why I'd missed his graduation. He had sent those 3 photographs, that was all. Whether that was Adam being considerate or Adam being Vanessa's husband, I couldn't tell anymore. I thought about Susan. She'd met Douglas and Irene once, at an engagement party the Holts had thrown 8 months before she died. She'd come home that evening quiet, in a way that was different from her usual quiet. I'd asked what she thought of them. She'd said, "They're the kind of people who are very generous when it costs them nothing." I opened the folder. 3 days later, I mailed 2 separate packages from 2 different post offices. One went to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division in Charlotte. One went to the North Carolina Department of Revenue. Each package contained a copy of Pete's documentation with a cover letter I'd written in the careful, formal language of 31 years in federal accounting. I knew what these agencies looked for. I knew how to present information so that it landed. Then I prepared a 3rd package, not for a government agency. The 3rd package was for Adam. I put together a summary document, 12 pages, clear language, no jargon, that explained what Holt Property Group had been doing and what it meant. I included copies of the most relevant documents. On the cover I wrote, "I thought you should understand who has been paying for things." I sealed it. I did not mail it yet. I kept it on my desk. Adam called that weekend, which surprised me. He asked how I was feeling, referenced my illness at graduation, asked if I'd seen a doctor. I told him I was fine. He mentioned that Vanessa and her parents were coming to visit at the end of the month, and that they'd all like to have dinner together. He sounded careful, rehearsed in the way people sound when someone has told them what to say. "I'd like that," I told him. I heard him exhale. Good, Dad. I'll send you the details." After we hung up, I sat for a while. Then I mailed the 3rd package, overnight delivery, so it would arrive Wednesday. The dinner was Saturday. Adam called Thursday morning. His voice was different, not angry, not yet. Confused, the way someone sounds when a familiar room has had all the furniture moved. "Dad, there's a package." He stopped. "Is this real?" "Every document in there is from public and professional records." "Dad." "I know." A long pause. "Vanessa doesn't know I have this." "I know that too." "What am I supposed to do with this?" "I don't know," I said. "That's yours to decide." He was quiet for a long time. "Did you know before? Did you know when?" "No. I found out after graduation." Another pause. "After the dinner?" "Yes." I heard him set something down on a hard surface. "I have to go," he said. "Okay." "Dad, I'll call you back." He called back 6 hours later. "I talked to her," he said. "To Vanessa." His voice was flat in a way that worried me more than anger would have. "She says her father's accountants have always handled everything and she doesn't know anything about it." "That may be true." "She's not. She wasn't part of it." "I don't know. Pete's investigation was focused on Douglas and the company. Vanessa isn't in any of those documents." He breathed out slowly. "Her father is calling me every 20 minutes. "I imagine so." "He says it's all a misunderstanding, that it can be explained. He wants to meet." "That's predictable." "Dad," his voice broke slightly just for a moment, "I used that money, the tuition. That was, if that money is." The obligation was between them and the government, I said carefully, not between you and anyone. You didn't know. He didn't say anything for a moment. Why didn't you just tell me when you found out? Why go through? Why do all of this? I thought about how to honestly. Because you wouldn't have believed me, and because I needed to be sure I was right before I put something in front of you that would change your life. Silence. And because, I said, you didn't call to ask why I missed your graduation. That sat between us on the line for a long time. I knew she'd asked you not to come, Adam said finally, very quietly. I found out after. She told me she'd mentioned it to you and you'd said it was fine. She said, I said it was fine. I should have called you. Yes. I'm sorry, Dad. I closed my eyes. Outside my window, the neighbour's dog was barking at something in the yard, the ordinary sound of an ordinary afternoon. I know, I said. The dinner that Saturday didn't happen the way anyone had planned. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division works at its own pace, which is slow and thorough and ultimately unstoppable. But the North Carolina Department of Revenue moved faster than I'd expected. By the Friday before the scheduled dinner, Whole Property Group had received formal notice of an audit and the document preservation order. Douglas had spent Friday on the phone with lawyers. The dinner was cancelled by text message from Vanessa to Adam 2 hours before it was supposed to happen. Adam drove to my house instead. He sat at my kitchen table and I made coffee the way I had thousands of times when he was growing up, and something had gone wrong at school or with a friend, the particular domestic ritual of a problem too large for the living room. He looked tired. He'd aged slightly in the past 2 weeks, in a way I recognized, the age that comes from something you trusted, turning out to be something else. The lawyers are saying it's serious, he said. It is serious. Vanessa she's a mess. She genuinely didn't know. At least, I believe her. I set a mug in front of him. I believe her too, for what it's worth. She's furious at them, at her parents. He wrapped both hands around the mug. She told her mother that what they did to you at that dinner, asking you not to come. She said she never would have agreed to that if she'd known what they were doing. She said she thought. He paused. She thought they were just being protective of her, their image. She didn't know they had reasons to keep things quiet. People with something to hide are often very careful about who's in the room. Adam looked at me. She asked me to ask you something. I waited. If you'd be willing to talk to her. Just the two of you. She wants to say something to you directly. I thought about it. Not long. Tell her yes. Vanessa came to my house the following Tuesday alone. She sat in the same chair at my kitchen table where Adam had sat 4 days earlier. She was composed in the way people are composed when it's costing them something to stay that way. She had her mother's posture and her father's eyes, and right now, both of those things looked like a burden. She said, I am genuinely sorry for what I said to you at that dinner, about the ceremony. She paused. I told you that you'd embarrass people, and that was cruel and it wasn't true. And I said it because my parents had coached me and I was young enough and foolish enough to think they knew better than I did about everything. She stopped again. I know that doesn't fix it. No, I said, it doesn't fix it, but it's something. She nodded. She looked at the table. I've been thinking about what you must have felt, driving home from that dinner. She looked up. I have a father too. I know what it would do to me. I said, what you just said took courage. I want you to know I heard it. She exhaled slowly. We talked for an hour. Not about the legal situation, not about her parents, just about Adam, about who he was when I was raising him alone after Susan got sick and before she died. The particular details of a person that only a parent knows. She listened the way people listen when they realize they've been given something they didn't know to ask for. When she left, she hugged me at the door, brief and awkward and real. Douglas Holt's attorneys spent 3 months trying to negotiate. The IRS doesn't negotiate the way private parties do. By autumn, Douglas had been formally charged with 5 counts of federal tax evasion and 2 counts of filing fraudulent returns. Irene was named as a co-defendant on 2 of the counts. The lake house was listed for sale. Holt Property Group was placed under a court-ordered financial review. I read about it in the Charlotte Observer one morning over breakfast and thought about calling Pete to say thank you, which I did. He said he was glad it had worked out. I told him it hadn't fully worked out yet. There was still the part where I was still estranged from my son's life in various small ways, still learning how to be someone's father-in-law when the relationship had started this way. He said that part sounded harder than the fraud investigation. I told him he was probably right. Adam and Vanessa came for Thanksgiving, the first Thanksgiving we'd had together in 3 years. Vanessa brought a pie she'd made herself, which was slightly overcooked at the edges and which I told her was excellent. Adam helped me set the table the way he had as a child, slightly wrong, forks on the wrong side, and neither of us corrected it. After dinner, while Vanessa was washing dishes despite my insistence that she didn't have to, Adam sat across from me in the living room with his elbows on his knees. He looked around at the photographs on the walls and the shelves, all of them, from a life that was mostly before Vanessa, before the Holts, before any of this. "I keep thinking," he said, "about that Sunday routine, the one we had after Mom died. The football Sundays." "Yeah." He looked at a photograph of Susan on the mantel. "I let that go pretty easily." I said, "You were building a life. That's what you're supposed to do. I should have protected you better. From how they treated you." He looked at me. "I knew something was off. I just didn't want to look at it." I said, "I know." "I'm sorry, Dad." I said, "I know that too." We were quiet together for a while. The easy quiet of 2 people who have the same memory of someone who is gone, sitting in the house where that person lived. Outside, it was getting dark at 4:30, the way it does in November, the particular early dark of the end of the year. Adam said, "You know, she wants to have kids." Vanessa. "Yeah." He smiled slightly. "Soon. She says she wants kids who know their grandfather." I looked at Susan's photograph. I thought about what she would have made of all of this, the fraud, the ceremony, the Tuesday afternoon when Vanessa sat in this kitchen and said something real. Susan had always believed that people were mostly capable of better than they were currently doing. She believed that about Adam when he was 17 and impossible. She'd believed it about me during some years when I gave her reason not to. I said, "Tell her they'll know their grandfather." Adam nodded. He didn't say anything else he didn't need to. Some things take the long way to arrive. That doesn't mean they don't arrive. I still think about that drive home from the dinner. 11:15 at night, the highway mostly empty, and me just sitting with what had happened. Vanessa had said it so pleasantly, "You'll embarrass everyone," as if she were doing me a favor by letting me know. What I've come to understand is that moments like that one are a kind of test, not the dramatic kind, not the kind you study for. Just a quiet question. What kind of person are you when something genuinely unfair happens to you? Do you collapse, or do you get very still and very clear? I got still. That's the only honest way I know how to describe it. 31 years of forensic accounting teaches you something that has nothing to do with numbers. It teaches you that the truth exists independently of what anyone says about it. The records are either accurate or they aren't. The deposits either match the invoices or they don't. You don't have to argue with a lie. You just have to find a document that contradicts it, and then you let the document speak. That discipline, the willingness to do the slow, unglamorous work of actually finding out what's true before you act on it, that's what I leaned on when everything else felt like it was coming apart. Douglas Holt could afford to be generous because he was stealing. That's not a metaphor. That's what the record showed. And the reason I was able to see it, document it, and put it in front of the people who needed to see it wasn't luck or anger. It was because I'd spent a career building the habit of patience and precision. and I didn't abandon those habits just because the situation was personal. If anything, the stakes made me more careful, not less. What I struggled with, what I still turn over sometimes, is the question of Adam. My son knew something was wrong and chose not to look at it. I understand why. It's not a comfortable thing to examine the people who are being generous to you. It's much easier to call your father and say feel better and let the Sunday dinners quietly disappear. I don't say this to blame him. I did my own version of the same thing for years with things I didn't want to see. But here's what I believe now. The people who are willing to look at the hard thing, to sit with the discomfort of what might be true and still do the right thing once they know it, those are the people you want in your life. Vanessa, in the end, was one of those people. She came to my kitchen and said something true without flinching. That took something real. I've seen grown men in federal depositions unable to do what she did that Tuesday afternoon. The Thanksgiving after all of it. Adam with his elbows on his knees, Vanessa in the kitchen with her slightly overcooked pie, the house full of ordinary noise. I thought about something Susan used to say. She said the most important things a person can give their child aren't things at all. They're the examples they set when they don't know anyone is watching. I'd spent 30 years setting those examples at a desk in windowless offices on cases where nobody would ever know my name. My son was watching the whole time. He just needed something to remind him what he'd already learned. That's enough. That's more than enough.